for your first Section 8 deal. Just give us some details on purchase price, rehab, ARV, or estimated rents, actual rents, and everything.
And speaking through Red, we picked Birmingham, Alabama. I think it's a great market for Section 8. So we were looking at Zillow listings and we found a property that was listed for $120,000. So we found it, we thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to put an offer on this one. Now, the reason why we vetted that specific property is because we saw various price drops. So I'll go from top to bottom. So we're getting rent of about $1,175. Our PITI is $874.90. Property management is $117.50. CapEx is 7% of our monthly rent, which comes out to about $82.25. Utilities, we put 0% because our tenant pays all the utilities, so we don't pay any of that, 0%. And after all, our bottom line is cash flowing a solid $100.35. But then, if you divide that amongst all of us, that's a good 3 months worth of Chipotle. So that's good enough for me.
Well, tell us about the appraisal part.
Yeah, so with this deal, we're tending to pull back all of our money out of the deal by getting a higher ARV and then being able to refinance it out. So our first appraisal came in at $90,000, and both RJ and I, we were super disappointed, with the amount of work, the amount of time, 4 months of holding, all of that just to get $90,000, that doesn't even cover our repair costs, I believe. So instead of sitting there letting it happen, we decided to reach out. So we approached it respectfully. The appraiser, they're another person. You don't want to talk to them in a rude way. They're just trying to help you understand the situation. So we called them up and kind of at a high level, we discussed the results. We wanted him to kind of reevaluate our property, but he literally said we need to give him raw data and any comps to justify any changes. So from there, we kind of just went out and analyzed the report that he gave us. So with his report, there's actually a couple inaccuracies. So there's 3 comps total. The first one was sold as is, so no renovation. And the one we did, we put in $24.5K worth of renovation. So that can't be a good comp. The second one he did was a 2-bedroom. Ours was a 3-bedroom. So there's a discrepancy there. And the third comp he used was contingent. So it hadn't even been sold yet. So that means the deal could not even close at that price. And on top of that, what we did was we gave him a couple of comps we thought would be a fair estimate for that area. So for this one, to be honest, we actually did reach a little bit. So you're not supposed to go over any major highways or major roads, stuff like that usually. But because there wasn't too many that we thought were a good fit, we expanded our zone a little bit. And from there, we were able to find some comps that are a little bit higher. They were a little bit of reach, but still in the ballpark. So yeah, we did that to try and increase it a little bit. And on top of that, we also sent our work plus our list of rehab items. So literally line by line of everything that we had changed about the property, along with the copy of the construction contract to the appraiser. So get all of that data. And I think something that really helped a lot as well is we gave him our confirmed Section 8 rent, which is 22% above market in that specific area. And I think by having all our numbers together, giving him very solid data, that definitely helped in getting our appraisal all the way up to $130,000.
Welcome to another episode of Affordable Housing and Real Estate Investing. Guys, today I'm so lucky to welcome RJ Sarabi and Chris Doe because they just got their first Section 8 rental up and running. And as you guys know, we bring on everybody from single family Section 8 investors all the way to multifamily and ground up construction because there are so many ways for all of us to make an impact in this world through housing. And anybody can play a small part. Anybody can get started with the right mentorship, the right guidance. And today I'm going to welcome these two guys onto the show so you guys can all learn from their experience because sometimes, honestly, when I started, I related to someone way more that just got their first deal than someone that had thousands of doors. So Chris, maybe let's start with you first. How did you even get into real estate? And then I'm going to jump to RJ afterwards.
Hey guys, my name's Chris. I'm from New York, and thank you so much for bringing us on to share our stuff. Really excited to do this. So for me, I started with social media back in high school, growing up TikTok accounts, Instagram accounts. Eventually, that one thing led to another, and I started working with coaches, influencers in the real estate space. From there, I got into Airbnb arbitrage. I got 2 units down in Austin. And then, things kind of just went on. And then I met RJ at a Bitcoin conference in Miami in 2023. And that's how we got into Section 8 together.
Wow. A Bitcoin conference? Okay. Maybe we've got some Bitcoin millionaires on this podcast. We'll have to cover that another day. RJ, how about you, man? How'd you even get to real estate?
Yeah, hey, Ken, appreciate you having me and Chris on here. Very, very excited. Let me just kind of take it back a little bit different than Chris. So I, was working in corporate America for about 5 to 6 years. So I was working at the bank as an underwriter doing commercial loans, and I was living out in California by myself. So everything was going well. I was making decent income. I was making decent salary, but I'm just like, why am I not rich yet? We're all wanting financial freedom. We all want to be able to progress in life. But at some point in life, I'm like, well, I'm doing pretty well. I'm getting promoted through my job, but I was living in a studio in Orange County, and I was like, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I should be having a nicer place. I should be able to support my family. So I ended up pretty much during COVID reevaluating kind of what my life was at the time, and I wanted to be able to start taking some savings that I had and putting it into real estate. So, like Chris said, one thing led to another. I was looking at all the influencers on Instagram and TikTok. I was reading books on real estate. I was listening to podcasts like Bigger Pockets and such, just to learn. And again, I don't have any real estate experience other than what Chris and I just did with our first property, and then started doing short-term rentals, and met Chris by accident in a Bitcoin conference. I'm not a big crypto guy. I was just accompanying some friends that were into crypto, so I was like, let me just follow along to see what I can learn from this conference, and met Chris, and we shared similar goals and mindset about preserving wealth, creating wealth, and be able to invest in real estate, and the rest is history. So
Man, what a cool story. Sometimes I tell people you got to go to these meetups and you really have to understand like what you're looking for. And somehow you guys went to this thing that you guys were both just trying to learn something from. And somehow you came up with a real estate partnership. That is such a great story, guys. And maybe this is a good lead in then. I guess the number one question I get all the time is, how do I structure the partnership? Because it's one thing to say, hey, let's just get together, do a deal together. But as we all know, every partnership ends at some point, right? Someone has to die, even if it's a lifelong one. Someone has to die. And learning how to structure these partnerships, roles and responsibilities, and how the partnership is going to end amicably, hopefully, is very important. So maybe, Chris, I'll start with you. How did you guys start structuring the partnership, and shed some light on that?
Yeah, for sure. So for us, we try to keep it simple. So basically what we had is we had an official document, a joint venture agreement, and we also had 3 other people who kind of invested in us, or not in us, but kind of we just pulled our money together to try to, acquire some property. So we made that agreement and gave a percentage of profits or whatever assets we had based on how much capital each person invested into our so-called fund. So RJ put in 35K, I put in 35K, and we had 3 other friends who also put in 10K each. So total, we had 35%, and then 10 for each of the 3 others. So their role is kind of just invest money, and they don't really have to do much. And RJ, for the work itself, we kind of just split it 50-50 because, we've never done an investment property before. We've done Airbnb, but that's a whole different game. So, finding the properties, all the work, we kind of just did it together. We would go on Zoom. Yeah, just, one thing at a time. Yeah, just figure it out.
Yeah, and let me just add on to that. So, Chris and I, we felt like we were both starting from the start line, we're both brand new. We don't have any experience. So rather than try to overcomplicate things, we say, hey, look, because we're both going to be learning at the same time, at the same pace, why don't we just keep it very, very simple? That way there's no major disagreements. There's no sort of headbutting. Because, a lot of times in partnership, you'll have people, there's a lot of egos that'll be involved. And, Chris and I don't have any of that. And so look, the 3 friends that, invested in us, I would consider them silent partners where they're working a W-2 job, they have some extra cash to be able to invest. So they typically don't have any operational involvement. So Chris and I would say we're 50-50 in terms of operations and what we do. And we both have our strengths and weaknesses and what value we can bring. And then we structure it to be, hey, because it's just us operating, this investment, let's just split it 50-50, half and half in terms of roles and responsibilities. And we both can support each other whenever we can. So
Ooh, I love how simple it is because it actually creates more questions for me. Let's talk about, let's take it decision by decision. So from my understanding, you guys had Rhett Wiseman as one of your coaches. Who found Rhett first and who decided to, I guess, lack of better words, like who decided to believe in him?
There's a lot of gurus out there. There's a lot of people that are coaching. And look, Chris and I, we believe in education, whether it's through paid programs or coaching. At the end of the day, we feel like we needed the education because a lot of times it's time versus money, right? Whether you can learn it on your own and spend months and years to learn the same thing that you would learn in a coaching program. Everybody learns at a different pace. I'm all for it. So what I was doing is just going online, like I said, Bigger Pockets, forums, Facebook groups, Instagram, TikTok, social media to figure out, find someone in the affordable housing Section 8 space that we want to learn from, right? And there's a few people that we looked into, but what made me believe in Red is just he was very low key when it comes to social media. He wasn't really pushing courses. He wasn't really pushing, clickbait ads. It was more so, hey, this is what I'm doing. This is what I'm teaching my clients. And you get hands-on experience working with me, which is Red. So I ran into Red, found his YouTube channel actually, and gave him a call, told him what I'm looking to do. And, we had a good discussion. And then I brought Chris on board. So, hey, Chris, this is what we're doing. Chris and I actually set up a call with Red. We talked to him as well on the phone, and we eventually got to meet him in person. And so that's how it kind of started our relationship with Red, is we needed a coach to help guide us through this process so we can avoid any costly mistakes. I mean, I'm sure we'll make plenty of mistakes in the future, but at least we'll have someone to help guide us through some of those.
Man, that's really cool that you found one and then Chris kind of just came along, and this shows me that you guys have great working synergy. How do you guys vet to make sure like your mentors are the right folks to be learning from? Maybe just give me like one point or one decision factor or one criteria that you guys use to say like, okay, this guy's believable. What made you guys get that sense of comfort? Because there's so many people right now that are new, that are looking for mentors, but they probably just don't know who to believe. What sort of advice do you guys have for them?
Yeah, so I'll go first, and Chris, you can provide your input. So I'll be specific when it comes to Red. So his background is in construction. So he understands construction and rehab, and he's done Section 8. So we were looking for people basically to have a proven track record, right? So I'm sure Red, when he first got started, he had plenty of mistakes that he faced and challenges, but we were looking for someone who has experience and track record and not necessarily pushing social media courses on everyone, which is what we didn't see. He was a very honest, down-to-earth person, and that's what made me believe in him.
Yeah, so for me, the biggest thing that I look at is, are they actually doing it themselves? And if you go on Brett's YouTube channel, you see him walking property, explaining it, going through the step-by-step, the daily motions. There's a lot of gurus online. You'll see them in front of their Lambo. Brett does have a Lambo. He has an orange Lambo, but you don't really see it online that much. And that kind of shows that, he's just there to put out the information. If you like it, you like it. If you don't. He's not using Lamborghini to try and sell you on his course. So yeah, and also just talking to him, you can get the vibes that, he's a good guy.
I love it. Sometimes you guys just got to use your gut and understand that, hey, your vibe attracts your tribe, and you got to figure out what type of folks do you want to hang out with. Is it just the flashy cars and the fancy houses, or do you actually want someone that's going to give you tactical steps, tangible advice, so that you guys can go off and do it on your own? So this is such a good conversation. Oh my God, I'm loving this, because this is some details that we never really get quite often enough. And maybe speaking of details, let's start talking about your first deal. Let's talk about, hey, for your first Section 8 deal, what did you look at? How did you analyze the deal? How did you find a team? And just give us some details on purchase price, rehab, and actual rehab costs, ARV or estimated rent, actual rents, and everything. Let's go through the whole 9 yards for this deal.
So Chris and I were both in the opposite sides of the country. I'm in California, Chris is in New York, and it's hard for us to find a market where it's local to us. California is very, very expensive. So is New York. So for the price to rent ratio that made sense for us was, somewhere in the Midwest. And speaking through Red, we picked Birmingham, Alabama. I think it's a great market for Section 8. So essentially what we did was we found on-market properties, because at that time, we didn't have any relationships for off-market properties. We're still working with wholesalers. We're still learning to work with agents. We're still learning to work with local investors in that area. But we were looking at Zillow listings, and we found a property that was listed for $120,000. This is back in June 2023. So we found it. We thought it would be a good opportunity for us to put an offer on this one. Now, the reason why we vetted that specific property is because we saw various price drops. So this is us looking at that property back in September. So June 2023 is listed for 120, and over the course of a few months following that, it saw various price drops as well as going contingent, but then coming back in the market. So we knew that the seller was motivated. There might be some underlying issues where other people just may look at it, inspect it, and then back out last minute. So that was one criteria. We say, hey, it's a motivated seller. Number two, we were looking at properties around the area and kind of seeing what the estimated ARV will look like. And I think for us, it was more so in the range of 115 to 120 in terms of actual ARV that we thought we could get for this property. And it was listed for 120, but we saw that the price drop continued to get lower and lower. And then we looked at the HUD rent for Section 8. So we looked at the small area FMR, which is, if you type it on Google, you could find the state and the county that property is located at by the zip code. And we saw that this is a 3-bedroom, by the way. So we saw that 3-bedroom properties were getting about $1,400 rent from Section 8. Now, I'm sure we'll go in detail later on, but typically when you see the rent on the HUD's website, you're going to have to discount at least $200 because there's a utility stipend that is included in that the tenant uses to pay for utilities. So HUD is not going to give you that full $1,400. So you should expect around 1,200, if anything, for the actual rent. So our rent estimate was around 1,200. Our ARV was about 115 to 120. And so basically at the time that we put in the offer, the price of the property was about 97,000. So we offered 75,000, but we offered all cash because Chris and I put our money together. We offered cash. We said, look, we'll buy for 75K cash, no inspection contingencies, no nothing. We can close pretty quickly. So, obviously we want to have some negotiation in between. They came back and said, hey, we're going to counter at 92,500. So again, we saw that because they were able to counter, we saw that they are actively looking to sell this property, and they even lowered their price from 97 to 92.5. So we're like, let's just try to, because we did want to get that first property, so we did increase our offer. So we ended up going up to 82,000. So still a little bit lower than what they're asking at 92. We went over to 82,000, and we ended up closing on 82,000. So as far as the rehab estimate, initially it was about 14,000, right? So it was about 14,000 to be able to do some of the work that's needed on the property to not only make it rent ready, but also to make it pass Section 8 inspection. And, for those that are doing Section 8, they'll understand that it's pretty rigorous. There's a lot of items, small, it could be small items that the inspector will go through and make the property not pass. So because if it doesn't pass, then you won't be able to rent it out, right? So we want to make sure that all the Section 8 items were taken care of. All the property still needed some work to be able to bring it to, rent ready. But we had a caveat that in the event this property needed a brand new HVAC unit, because it is a little bit dated, our budget could go from 14,000 up to 24,000 in rehab. Long story short, once we closed on this property, we did end up spending 24,000 on the rehab, which included putting in a brand new HVAC. So that's kind of what Chris and I went and discussed. That, hey, what do we do? Do we just fix it up, the 14,000 renovation budget, and then call it a day? Or do we actually want to put a brand new HVAC so that we know that the family is getting the best property and that we don't have to worry about any major capex that'll come later on down the line? So, all in all, I think we spent about 106,000 in total costs when you add the purchase price and the renovation. So that's kind of how we first closed our first property. But happy to go in more detail, Kent, on kind of what the numbers look like as far as what we got in rent, what the appraisal was, and how we handled that process as well.
Yeah, since we're on the rehab part, what was the original estimate for the rehab timing, and how long did it actually take, and when all was said and done? Yeah,
initially it was just simple rehab, should be about 2 weeks, 14,000, but it ended up taking, I believe, 3.5 weeks, around 3.5 weeks, a month, a little bit less than a month, because we had to go get a brand new HVAC, and then also we had to do extensive landscaping. There was overgrown grass and shrubs all over the unit, and the county and the city actually said that we have to take care of that, or else we would get fined by the city if we don't take care of the landscaping. I think maybe it could be like a safety thing. We're not sure yet, but so it usually took us 3.5 weeks or so.
Got it. And when did you guys have to decide on HVAC? Did you guys discover that like midway, or you guys already knew that, hey, from the inspection or the walkthrough, you already knew that might have been a potential item that you had to address anyways?
Yeah, so thankfully we had pretty good contractors that were very familiar with that area. And these contractors were also, by the way, contractors were recommended by RED. So these contractors were also very well versed in Section 8 items. So when they inspected it, they say, hey, look, the HVAC, it works, but it's dated. Judging by how it looks, you may get some issues later on down the line. And so that's something you have to consider. Are you okay with just leaving it as is? It is old, it's worn out, and there's potential for issues, or even some replacement down the line? Or do you want to just replace it now and take care of it? So Chris and I were like, hey, look, it's our first property. Let's not just cut corners. Let's make sure that we do a thorough job of providing a brand new HVAC unit, which I think that in itself was about 10,000, if I remember correctly. It was just the HVAC unit to replace the entire unit. And so that's what we decided. We'll just go ahead and replace it, so that way we don't have to worry about any major cost later down the line.
Oh, wow. Was that just a condenser, or was that like ductwork involved too?
Ductwork involved as well. The entire unit had to be replaced. So pretty much everything.
Got it. Okay. Now that you guys finished a rehab, what happened there? Did you guys get an inspector out there right away? Tell us a little bit about that process in the inspection.
Yeah, so the inspector went in there and it didn't pass inspection the first try. I think our contractors did a pretty good job. It's more so you'll find that a lot of the inspectors, depends on who goes out there. Some of them will just be very, very picky about every little item that they see. It could be a little chip wood on the front of the hallway. They'll say, hey, there's a safety hazard, you got to replace this. So very small items. So we didn't pass the first time. And when we looked at the items that they sent, it was just small items by the window, something about the door, just very small knickknacks there. So that was a little bit disappointing because that, of course, is going to delay our tenant moving in, right? So we couldn't bring a tenant in there. We couldn't receive rents until we had it re-inspected. So we went and sent the items back to our contractors that did the work. So hey, look, these are some of the items that need to be updated in order to pass inspection. And they're great people, so they went in there. Obviously, they didn't cost us anything extra for them to go back and retouch the property to fix those items. Then we had another inspector go in there the second time, re-inspect it, and then we ended up passing the second time. And that's kind of what made us pretty happy about also learning the process and making sure that we will do a thorough job on the items, but we ended up passing the second time.
That's a great lesson learned. And maybe I want to tease out for people, especially if you are underwriting these deals, you guys got to underwrite for holding costs. So between a month for the rehab, and then I'm assuming you had to wait again for the inspector to come back out. So how long did you have to wait before the inspector got to go back out again?
Yeah, it was maybe another 2 weeks or so and also let me just add in this time period that Section 8, the Housing Authority, because it's a government agency, they're also going to be experiencing delays on getting you a tenant. So all in all, we didn't end up, so we closed on, let me give dates. We closed on this property October 31st, 2023. I think renovation, everything finished, by November. Inspector went in there mid-November and then didn't pass. Then they went again towards the late part of November. Then after it passed, we had to send all the Jefferson County Housing Authority, where our property is located, to get a tenant. Once they got the package and the tenant and the paperwork, we didn't sign the actual HAP agreement, which is Housing Authority payment, the HAP contract with the tenant, until February 1st. So there was a few months until we actually got the tenant and the lease agreement signed, which was on February. And then we ended up having the tenant move in March 1st of 2024. So it was quite some time before we actually got the tenant in there to make their first rental payment.
Wow. So that's almost like an extra November, December, January, February, extra 4 months of holding costs.
Yeah.
So for some of you all that's analyzing deals right now with just 3 months of holding costs, maybe you want to bump up to 4 and anticipate one misinspection. And sometimes there's just a little timing thing, because if you get your HAP contract signed February 1st, and I'm not sure, is this a county that makes people move in on the 1st of each month?
Yeah, we talked to a property management company that also has they handle a lot of Section 8 housing tenants, and they said it depends on which housing authority you work with. Some housing authority will be very quick in processing the tenant's paperwork and paying rent ahead of time. Some of them, whether they're short staffed or low on funds as far as budgeting goes, may be a little bit slower. So again, if you are in the affordable housing space, or if you want to get into Section 8, just keep in mind that the process may take a little longer than you anticipate. You can't just close the property and then next month have everything done, and a month after you have a tenant in there rent ready. It could happen. I guess Chris and I aren't there yet as far as making things move quickly, but it did take us 3 or 4 months to get our first one rent ready and have tenant pay rent.
Man, I'm so glad you guys came on, because you guys bring the reality of the situation. Because for everyone that thinks it's just all unicorns and rainbows, it's not it. There will be problems. You will face it. And that's why I really urge everyone, and I'm assuming everyone that listens to this right now, you guys want to make an impact with your capital. You want to do good in your everyday investing career. And this is part of it, right? And that's why your why needs to be so important. Your dedication to helping people has to be there, because you have to push through these obstacles when they come up. And well, speaking of obstacles, let's talk a little bit about the bright side, and then I want to get into the appraisal, because this is such a good story. What did it actually rent out for compared to what you thought it was going to rent out for?
Yeah, so we estimated it'll rent anywhere between $1,100 to $1,200, because the actual 2024 fair market rent was around $1,420. Give it a $200 haircut for the utility stipend, so it's around $1,220. So we thought it would be around that range, and it actually rented pretty close to that at $1,175. So as of right now, it's being rented for $1,175. And I guess the good thing with that is we could always ask for rental increases every year. So we do know that number is going to go higher, but we were a little bit lower than what we projected, but at least a good amount for that area.
Yeah, and that's a great tip because now I can use 1175 for that area around their house to do my own underwriting. And sometimes this is why we create this community, everybody, is so that we can learn some of these numbers from other folks that are investing in similar areas. So you can get a little bit more accuracy, a little bit more comfort in selecting the market and identifying an area for what your assumptions might be. Now, with 1175, how do you guys underwrite? What kind of expense assumptions do you put into your underwriting or you estimate or you're setting aside for maintenance and CapEx?
Yeah, so I'll go over that and maybe I'll even discuss kind of what is cash flowing right now. So when Chris and I look at it, we'll look at the fair market rent for that zip code. It will take the lower of 85% of the number that's listed on the Housing Authority's website, or whatever the amount is, minus $200 for the utility stipend. So whatever the lowest of that is, that's what we'll actually underwrite to as our rent for potentially getting it, start with. And then we do factor in property management fees because we're out of state, so we have to have someone else manage it for us. So that would be 10%. That's the property management company's fee for managing our property is 10% of the monthly rent. So they're taking $117.50 of that. And then we factor in about 7% for CapEx or any sort of repairs that it will need on a monthly basis. So, and then for vacancies, we didn't put any vacancy factor only because, I guess we should have, because we knew Section 8, these tenants typically stay on average 5+ years. So we don't have a vacancy factor for our specific underwriting just because it's Section 8, but we do have property management as well as CapEx baked into the cash flow. So I can definitely go over the numbers, Ken, to kind of show you what we're cash flowing right now and kind of what our expenses are on a monthly basis.
Yeah, let's go for it. What's your cash flow right now estimated to be?
Yeah, so I'll go from top to bottom. So we're getting rent of about $1175. Our PITI, which is principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, is $874.90. Again, property management is $117.50. CapEx is 7% of our monthly rent, which comes out to about $82.25. Utilities, we put 0% because that's what the tenant pays. So the tenant pays all the utilities, so we don't pay any of that, 0%. And after all, our bottom line is cash flowing a solid $100.35. But then, if you divide that amongst all of us, that's a good 3 months worth of Chipotle. So that's good enough for me.
I love it. Well, tell us about the appraisal part and what you guys originally do. What were you originally intending to do, Chris, with this deal?
Yeah, so with this deal, we're tending to pull back all of our money out of the deal by getting a higher ARV and then being able to refinance it out. So our first appraisal came in at $90,000. And, both RJ and I, we were super disappointed, with the amount of work, the amount of time, 4 months of holding, all of that just to get $90,000, which is, that doesn't even cover our repair costs, I believe. So instead of sitting there, letting it happen, we decided to, reach out. So we approached it respectfully because, the appraiser, they're another person. You don't want to talk to them in a rude way. They're just trying to help you understand the situation. So we called them up and kind of at a high level, we discussed the results. We wanted him to kind of reevaluate our property, but he literally said we need to give him raw data and any comps to justify any changes. So from there, we kind of just went out and analyzed the report that he gave us. So with his report, there's actually a couple inaccuracies. So there's 3 comps total. The first one was sold as is, so no renovation. And the one we did, we put in 24.5K worth of renovation. So that can't be a good comp. The second one he did was a 2-bedroom. Ours was a 3-bedroom. So there's a discrepancy there. And the third comp he used was contingent. So it hadn't even been sold yet. So that means the deal could not even close at that price. And on top of that, what we did was we gave him a couple of comps we thought would be a fair estimate for that area. So for this one, to be honest, we actually did reach a little bit. So you're not supposed to go over, any major highways or major roads, stuff like that usually. But because there wasn't too many that we thought were a good fit, we expanded our zone a little bit. And from there, we were able to find some comps that are a little bit higher. They were a little bit of reach, but still in the ballpark. So yeah, we did that to try and increase it a little bit. And on top of that, we also sent our work plus our list of rehab items. So literally line by line of everything that we had changed about the property, along with the copy of the construction contract to the appraiser. So he had all of that data. And I think something that really helped a lot as well is we gave him our confirmed Section 8 rent, which is 22% above market in that specific area. And I think by having all our numbers together, giving him very solid data, that definitely helped in getting our appraisal all the way up to $130,000, which is like a 50% increase almost.
Got it. Let me set the stage a little bit for the audience. So you guys were attempting the BRRRR method, right? The buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat, so that you guys can recycle the capital you use for this deal as much as possible towards the next deal. Am I that fair statement? Okay.
Yeah.
The second part is, well, what type of loan were you trying to refinance this property into?
Yeah. So whatever gave us the maximum amount that we could get, it could either be a conventional cash out refinance loan or a DSCR loan, which is a debt service coverage ratio loan. So those are the two that Chris and I were looking, and whichever one gave us the max, we went for that specific one. Also, not only that, if we did get a large loan amount or the cash out, we wanted to make sure that our monthly rent payment did cover all the debt service and expenses, so we could cash flow. Because at the end of the day, we didn't want to be putting money into the deal every month by paying debt service and expenses. We want to make sure at least it was feasible for us to cash flow every month, and the loan size made sense for the amount of rent we're getting.
Got it. So was the loan product like a 75% LTV product, or what were you guys trying to refinance into, and what was the interest rate that you guys got?
Yeah, so I'll go over the refi process. Before I get to that, I want to just kind of touch base and add a little bit more to what Chris mentioned on the appraisal. So for those that are listening, at least in our very first property, sometimes when you get the appraisal report, a lot of us think, and me and Chris are guilty of that too, we thought that was the final verdict. Hey, the appraisal came in. By the way, our lender would not have refinanced us. I think we forgot to mention this. Our lender said if this property does not appraise of 100,000 and more, we can't give you a loan, because that was their criteria. So every lender is going to minimum property value amount that they have to, we can borrow against. So they said if you don't appraise for 100,000, we can't do the loan. So that was something that we had to overcome. And when the property appraised for 90,000, Chris and I were like, well, are we done yet? Is there anything we could do? But thankfully, we were able to, talk to the appraiser, and once our property did reach 130,000, we were very happy. But what I wanted to get into was make sure that you provide the appraiser with all the work that you've done, right? So, you put in a lot of hard work, you put in a lot of money and capital into your deal. So just present that to the appraiser and kind of tell them, hey, this is exactly the type of work that we did on this property because it's needed. When it comes to comps, I would say review the appraisal in depth, because appraisals can be very, very intimidating. Chris and I know it's like 50 plus pages. It's long, it's tedious, there's so many data points, so many information, but it's important for you. So just review that in detail. And we did find 3 comps that just didn't make sense. So presenting the appraisal with data, with the amount of renovations that you've done on the property, and obviously giving him copies of those definitely helped us in our case. So if that means anything for the people that are disputing appraisals, give that a try, and hopefully that'll help the appraiser reevaluate the value. So I just want to make sure I add that. But as far as the loan amount, so again, we ended up going with a DSCR loan. This wasn't a perfect BRRRR for us, but again, lots of lessons learned throughout the process. We ended up getting a loan amount of $85,200, so we still had money left in the deal, mainly because our rent amount of $1,175 had to be at least 1.20 times that service coverage ratio. So if you do the math, our PITI payment, principal, interest, tax, and insurance, plus our property management fee every month, the rent had to be 1.20 times that. So I think based on that specific number, the maximum loan amount that we were approved for was $85,200. Now, if we did a conventional loan where we got 75% of 130, we would have gotten a higher loan amount, but I don't think we would cash flow in that scenario, because we did get a high interest rate of 8.427%. So 30-year loan, 8.427% interest rate. And this is a DSCR loan, and thankfully our lender did not require a seasoning period. So typically you have to have 6 months before you could refinance. So our lender did not require that. So that was another good attribute of working with Rehab, was he introduced us to that lender. So we're able to refinance pretty much as soon as we could once we had the tenant in there.
Yeah, that's great news. So as soon as you guys got the HAP contract signed, is that the trigger point for when you started applying for the refinance? Because then you actually had a lease agreement in place that you can show to the lender?
Yeah, that was one of the requirements for the lender. He said, look, I just need the HAP contract or the lease agreement, and also a receipt of the first rental payment. As long as I have that, we can go ahead and process the refinance.
And there's so many lessons learned from this that I really hope everyone can take into account. One is learning how to communicate respectfully and professionally. 2, the person that's appraising your home, he's just trying to do his job or her job, make their life a little bit easier. provide the comms, do a little extra homework, because at the end of the day, especially when you have investors' capital involved, it's your responsibility to get the best result for your property. You don't just throw up your arms in the air and say, oh, that's it, bad luck. This is you pushing through even when push came to shove. And I'm so glad to hear, like, you saw me when you texted me about the results of your deal. I was like, whoa, that's amazing. Congratulations. Because I was so down for you when I heard about the first appraisal. And I'm so glad you guys fought it, because this is such a great story that everyone, especially if you're on your first deal and you're looking to do the BRRRR method, that appraisal is not the be all end all. And maybe one thing you can do upfront is like, hey, if you guys ever get the appraiser and you know they're going that day and you have their phone number and you're trying to coordinate the appraiser getting out there, send them some comps too, make their life a little bit easier, make the first appraisal a little bit easier. Because that's what I did when I did my first BRRRR. So I don't know, are there any other lessons from this deal, RJ or Chris, that you would like to bring up and really highlight a little bit more for the audience today?
Yeah, so I'll go first, and then Chris, if you want to piggyback off of what I said. But for us, basically, treat all your stakeholders as partners, right? So our lenders, our property management, our the appraiser, contractors. At the end of the day, we're trying to build relationships, and who knows how many other deals we're going to be doing with these folks. So we wanted to make sure we build long-term relationship with them. So we have good communication with all of our vendors, all of our partners. We want to make sure we take extensive notes. We keep a Google Drive of all the things that we've done, and we even created a checklist of, hey, what is step one of buying a property? What does step two look like, all the way to when you get a tenant? So we have that in case we want to pass that along to future employees. And Chris and I do more business development and capital raising, we can pass on the operational side to other people that we eventually hire. So just take notes, build good solid relationship, and obviously do your research. Especially as you guys can see, the appraisal came in under, the rehab was over budget, and being brand new, all of it could be intimidating. But just do the proper research. I think when you have good raw data to support your research, I think that in itself brings confidence in you to be able to move forward. So I think that's kind of what my lessons learned were. And then Chris.
Yeah, for me, probably the biggest lesson going through this whole process is, always assume the worst in terms of expect the worst. It's not going to be the worst, but just know going into it, the numbers are not going to be as pretty as you think. Even on the cash out refi, right? So we got 85.2 at 8.4%. The closing costs alone were like 8,000, which is, higher than we initially expected. So our actual cash pulled out was actually 77.2. So we got hit with that because, we didn't know beforehand. Also, the 4 months of holding, we obviously didn't go into that expecting that. And, the reinspection, the tenant coming in after like such a long period. So I'd say like the biggest thing I learned is just, expect a little bit worse and then see what you can do about it then.
Yeah, I love those lessons because I think it can set a little bit lower expectations. It kind of eases everybody's expectations. And so my mantra is always always over deliver whenever you can. And I think learning from your guys' experiences, especially from the audience listening today, I think they're going to take away, one, how to analyze the deal, how to work with contractors, doing things the right way by doing those upfront renovations, and then also learning how to work with an appraiser when things might not go exactly your way. And I love how you just highlighted the closing costs, because something that sometimes like people always forget about that. They think it's just a purchase price and a rehab. And it's like, guys, no. When you do a refi, there are closing costs, there are lender costs, origination fees, all those items that will come up. So please, 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 take that into account and set realistic expectations so that you're not promising investors like, oh, you're going to get all your capital back out the minute we refi, because that might not be the situation. So, all right, we'll get to the point here. Now that you guys close your first deal, Chris, maybe I'll start with you. What's sort of next with a partnership? Like, what are you guys trying to do next? Are you guys trying to say you want a single family, multifamily? Tell us a little bit more about next steps with a partnership.
Yeah, so for us, we're always trying to expand, grow. The first deal wasn't the prettiest, and that's all right. It's never going to start with the home run deal. Ideally, for the rest of this year, we're going to look into getting even more single family asset classes via Section 8. But, ideally, we do want to get those portfolio deals. It doesn't have to be like 40, 50 unit one. It could be 2, 3, 4 to 6, and then 10, slowly working our way up. Yeah, our goal is just to like continue learning and seeing what comes and what we're able to find, and just, throughout the rest of 2024, continue building up that portfolio.
Love it. All right. Getting to this point in the podcast now, And I want to know, this is a question I ask everybody, and I just kind of love to hear your perspective after going through your first deal. Maybe RJ, I'll start with you. Like, why do you think affordable housing, particularly the lack of supply of affordable housing, is like kind of so hard to solve for?
In my personal opinion, as I continue to learn about the space, I just think it's probably a stigma. A lot of investors don't want to touch that sort of asset class because the stigma that's around it. It's affordable housing, it's low income, it's people that may not respect your property, they may cause damages, and so I don't even want to go near there. So to me, it's probably just a stigma. But also, I think that the actual government programs could be a little bit more revamped as far as the process goes. Things could be a little bit more streamlined. If there's a way to incentivize investors even more to be able to purchase affordable housing assets, then that could probably make the process even better. But I think to me, just probably the stigma that's around the affordable housing and the type of tenants that you get. But look, if you do if you take the proper steps of screening the tenants the right way, if you do the background check the right way, and if you work with a good property management company, at the end of the day, these are individuals with families with real jobs that just want to have a comfortable, clean space to live and raise children and just start a family. There's no difference than you and me. So I think that's something that a lot of investors can take into consideration and just be able to invest more in affordable housing and be able to create better space for these communities. But that's just kind of what I think.
No, I love that. And my goal is maybe, or just have people DM you guys in a year. Like, hey, how's your tenant working out for you? Can you guys dispel any more of the stigma? Because that's one of my main missions with this podcast, is to show that there are great people in the Section 8 program that just needs a safe roof over their heads for their kids, just like it was the case for my family. And Chris, did you have anything else to add on why you think affordable housing is so hard to solve for?
Yeah, I think part of it is how difficult it is to kind of get into it. Like if you look online, the government, there's not too many resources just available open online like there's for some other stuff. And yeah, as RJ said, the stigma around it, they think it's like some really rundown thing, there's that stereotype. But, like when you actually go there, like RJ and I, we visited our property in person in Birmingham. It's actually very nice. Like we talked to everyone there. It's a lot better than it's made out to be seen online.
That is such a great perspective. All right, guys. Hey, first of all, thank you so much for what you guys do, because seriously, without people like you guys, I would have never had the home I grew up in. So if anybody wants to reach out to you guys and find out more about you, start with you, Chris. Where can people find you and reach out to you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at It's Christo, just my name. Yeah, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone.
How about you, RJ?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram is just at rj. My last name is Sarabi, and then Facebook is my full name, which is IRAJ, and then my last name is Sarabi. So Instagram and Facebook, and just reach out. Chris and I are happy to answer any questions, get on calls, just to kind of share our experience with anyone. And this is property number one, but the first of many to come, hopefully.
Yeah, and I'm so excited for you guys. It's such a great story to see and hear about your success in your first property. So guys, if you're listening right now, please go out there, please follow Chris. Please follow RJ. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast yet, please hit that subscribe button. And if you guys have any questions, you can leave a comment on a YouTube video. Thank you, everybody. And we are out.